So we'll be building a new package, a FastAPI package authentication wrapper. So we'll start from scratch to uploading to FastAPI. Yeah, so people can install. So we'll start with this. We'll say UV init, then we'll give it a name, call it FastAPI auth wrapper, and then we'll give it a project, also FastAPI auth wrapper. Need it to put the library. Yeah, and also yeah, that's enough. I'll give it a build backend. Yeah. Build backend, I'll use UV. So create that, then we'll seed into it. And put a virtual environment like that, and then we'll activate that, and then open VS Code. So yes, this is our project. So this is how it looks. So once you create, you'll be given src, then you'll have the package name here. So you can see the type I typed. So because this is typing, we'll try to implement that. Okay, and also we have the virtual environment which has been created. Then we have .git ignore. So here we'll add certain stuff like virtual has been added. It has not created git, so I'll add .pnv like that. Okay, so we don't have git, so we'll initialize here. So initialize git from here. Need it to load here. So I'll say git init like that, so that okay, that was git already. So once we have this, then we have that, and then we have this. So this is our project. So what do we want to build? So we want to build a FastAPI authentication wrapper, whereby if, for example, you have a centralized authentication service and then you have multiple FastAPI applications, and then you want to authorize. So you'll be authorizing, the client will submit the token, the JW token, through the header, and then you'll capture those, and then you'll also again validate those one to your authentication backend. Okay, so the backend can be any application, the backend can be any service, yeah, or you can build it on anything. So it can be JavaScript, it can be JavaScript based, it can be Python based, it can be Java based, whichever authentication backend you are using. But now this package only works for FastAPI. Okay, so FastAPI application. So I'll be guiding. So this will be, might be a series where I'll be guiding you on first how we are going to build this, and then once we are done with the building, and then now we can guide you on how you can integrate it into different backend applications, so, and also on your different FastAPI applications. So what I'm going to do from here, now I'll start to organize our package. So I'll have, so here I'll just create the underscore init. Okay, it's not needed in this case, in this SRC, but okay, I just prefer having it there. So here now I'll create a config file, config folder. Yeah, and this our config folder will hold settings. Okay, so our config folder will hold settings. So I'll come here and then I'll create settings.py. Okay, so once I have that, remember I've said this is a FastAPI package, so this will implement FastAPI. We'll just be building the FastAPI structures. Okay, so from here I'll be using Pydantic. So once you install this, it will look for the .env file here. So we'll now need to configure that. So I'll come here and then do .env like that. Yeah. Okay, so the .env file will contain our configuration. So inside here, I'll come here now. I'll install FastAPI. So I'll activate now my FastAPI, my virtual environment, and like that. Wait for it. So that, then I'll do FastAPI add, and then I'll add FastAPI. Okay, UV add that FastAPI and the standard. So we don't install the static assets. So once we have this will come in Pydantic and the Pydantic settings. So inside here, I'll just import. I'll start with pathlib. So say from pathlib and import path. Then another this directory with the path for the current file, this all parent. So the parent will be inside config, second parent will be inside the first API, third will be inside the SRC, but then we need the fourth so that it can read the base. So I'll say this will be project, this will be SRC directory, and then now to have the base, we'll do the SRC like that. Then I'll now create our settings and import from Pydantic. From Pydantic settings, import base settings. I'll also import settings, config dict. So the settings, I'll inherit the base settings, and then the secret key, we don't need this, you don't need debug, and that name maybe, but yes, so I'll say model config like that, and then in this case, for example, because we are using Pydantic in certain scenarios, the settings config will try to raise errors if you have variable inside the env which are not declared under this setting object. So we'll add certain flag here where we'll say where we'll say extra, we give it a value of yeah, so this is what we need. Now in this case, I might set the base URL. Remember, this will be the authorization service variables. So what you need here is the base URL. So auth service URL, auth service token URL. So these two. Yeah. So we have that. Now what we want, like this in your dot environment, maybe you might decide to use capital letters. In this case, I'll just go with the small. So when you're doing the small letters, you may use a field. You can come from Pydantic, import fields, and then you come here, we say field like that, and then you refer the environment variables. Okay, so if you look at this, we have here auth service URL, but inside the .env it is auth service URL caps. So probably you want to do that. Still you can override these settings. So we'll provide these ones. That for now they'll be empty. So basically we are done with this. So if you need a version, for example, but in my case I don't need a version, so yeah, so we're done with that. So we'll create it here. And then call in that object like that. So once we have this, then we'll import it inside the init file. So from .settings, import settings, and say all settings like that. So this is all about our config settings, and see you in the next